Skorecki, MD. Karl Skorecki was born and raised in Toronto, the only child of Holocaust survivors. He studied medicine at the University of Toronto, where he graduated in 1977 with a gold medal for highest overall standing in the faculty, including many other awards. Currently, the Director of Medical and Research Development at Rambam and Director of Rappaport Research Institute at the Technion, Karl continues to conduct world-renowned research in human molecular genetics and stem cell biology. Currently, Professor Skorecki is leading a breakthrough project which is rapidly advancing towards treatment options to prevent the 4 to 5-fold increased prevalence of kidney disease in African ancestry populations, including African Americans, Caribbean populations, and sub-Saharan continental Africa. So please, with that being said, please welcome Professor Karl Skorecki. Come on up to the front, sir.
God bless you. Good morning. God bless you from the Holy Land of Israel, where I live, as you heard. Not only do my wife, Linda, and I, our 5 children and our 14 grandchildren, have the privilege of living in the Holy Land of Israel, we live in the Galilee, near the Sea of Galilee, where we know much of the gospel and much of what was written in the gospel took place. So it is a privilege, a great privilege, and a great blessing for me to be here in this amazing, amazing dome of faith. We are all people of faith. And I'd like to thank the director, Angela Evans, for the opportunity. And it is a great, great privilege for me to be here and speak about an area of passionate concern for human health that I've been blessed to be involved in. And with God's blessing, we've made progress that I'd like to share with you. The Rambam Medical Center is in northern Israel, as I said, in the Galilee region. Unfortunately, the Holy Land of Israel is under some attack now by forces which we pray to God, and we want your prayers too, that God bless us with peace in the Holy Land. We're doing our best at Rambam Medical Center to serve people of faith from all faiths, and we value and prize and praise the sanctity of human life, all human life. As you heard, I'm a kidney disease specialist. I'm a nephrologist. I trained in Boston, in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, which you may have heard of many years ago. And I was inspired to become a kidney disease specialist because most of my clinic were African American patients, many of whom had kidney failure, many of whom were on dialysis or had family members or dear loved ones on dialysis. And that set me on a lifelong pathway to try to understand kidney disease, try to help people with kidney disease. And it turned out that the African American community, African heritage populations have more kidney disease than anyone should have, and we want to try to benefit that and overcome that. I'd like to share with you some of the experience over the years and some of the progress we've made at Rambam Medical Center, and I believe it's special that this is coming out of the Holy Land, that these breakthroughs are coming out of the land of Israel, and I can share them with you today in this Dome of Faith. So I did bring some pictures, some slides to help me explain this to you, because I'm a physician and I teach students. I'm not really someone who can speak as clearly as pastors and preachers can, but I beg your indulgence and I beg your cooperation and listening as I try to explain and hopefully answer some questions that you may have, because I would imagine, I hope everyone is well, and whoever isn't well, that God will bless them with good health. But I would think that there may be people among us here who know someone with kidney disease, know someone with high blood pressure, maybe have a loved one, and this might be of interest to you, and I'd like to try to address some of the questions as well. I'll try to do this briefly and also try to preempt or have answers to some of your questions. And of course, I'm always available at Rambam Medical Center. My dear friend Michelle is here too. She's in the United States. We have a representative in Los Angeles, and anyone can contact me if they have questions about kidney disease. So if I may have some help from our dear friends here to get the slide presentation, which just has a few slides, and there it is, and I can see it right in front of me, and you can see it. We are interested mostly in preventing kidney disease. The best way to deal with disease is for God to bless us with good health and the wisdom to be able to prevent. And if someone does have kidney disease, then to cure them, bring them back to good health, and prevent what we really don't want people to have, and that is dialysis. Can I have the next slide, please? Well, what do the kidneys do? You know, the kidneys are mentioned in the Bible. They're mentioned many times. They come in a pair. They were considered by the ancient wise men and women to be the seat of conscience, because they're deep. They're deep, and they're often used as a metaphor for conscience. In the body, in medical terms, they filter wastes and toxins from the blood. They regulate our body fluid levels, how much fluid we retain. Some people retain fluid. They have what's called edema. They gather fluid in their bodies. They swell up. That's when the kidneys don't work well. They keep the blood minerals in balance, minerals such as phosphorus, which is just loaded in our food, especially in processed foods. Salt. Sometimes we eat too much salt. We indulge in too much salt. Potassium. They make hormones that regulate our blood pressure and keep our blood pressure normal. We don't want our blood pressure to be too high because that's dangerous. Vitamin D to keep our bones strong and healthy, and they prevent anemia. They make a very, very important hormone which keeps our red blood cells high and prevents us from getting anemia. That's what our healthy kidneys should be doing. Next, please. Now, unfortunately, sometimes, for reasons that come about and we can prevent, the kidneys don't work well. This term, CKD, is an abbreviation for chronic kidney disease, when the kidneys over time don't work well. How does that show up? What happens? That can manifest, that can show up as high blood pressure. Many suffer from blood pressure. In the African American community, up to 50% of people might suffer from blood pressure over their lifetime, and that has its complications, and we want to prevent that, and that's also related to the kidneys. If I can have there we are. Weak bones as a result of high blood pressure, heart attack and stroke, things we really don't want to happen. We want to prevent them. Weak bones, nerve damage, anemia, and ultimately kidney failure, which can, in the final stage, can end up with the need for dialysis, or some people can be blessed and get a transplant and kidney transplant and restore their normal life. Is this a major problem or is this a minor problem? We hear about this. I'm a physician. We're on a Sunday morning in the Faith of Dome. We want to talk about good things, and we know that God will bless us with the cures that'll bring about health, but we do face challenges, cancer, heart disease, and kidney disease is one of them. Is it a big problem? It is a big problem, unfortunately, and we have to deal with it, but God is also blessing us with the answers. How big a problem is it? Let's see in the next slide, please. It affects at least 400 million people worldwide. In the United States, kidney disease is divided, I said it's a chronic disease, into 5 stages. Early, undetectable, slightly detectable. Stage 5 is when the kidneys are so poorly functioning the person needs to be on dialysis. Well, there are millions, tens of millions of Americans who have the early stages of kidney disease, and then close to a little more than 500,000 who are on dialysis. Next, please. So this dialysis is the tip of the iceberg, but for every dialysis patient, there are at least 10 times more who have earlier stages of kidney disease with high blood pressure and actually don't make it to dialysis because they aren't alive, because they have succumbed, God forbid, to stroke or a heart attack. That's what we want to prevent. That's what we're here for. Now, an observation is that, as was mentioned, the African ancestry population, that's African Americans, Caribbean Americans, and Canadians, have 4 or 5 times more kidney disease and have a bigger family history of kidney disease than other populations. And that's something that has always bothered me for 30 or 40 years since I was very deeply involved with the community, and something I've been pursuing for my whole professional career. Next, please. Next, please. I'll skip that slide because I've already mentioned it. So this shows the difference. So this is a graph, and this graph shows, it's very well documented in the United States. There's a registry. African Americans, the black population in the United States, has 4 times more kidney disease at all stages than whites or Asian Americans. 4 times more. And more importantly, family history. If someone is on dialysis, they're more likely to have family members with high blood pressure and other kidney problems. Next, please. This shows it again, so we'll just skip and move on. Next slide, please. Now, this is a disparity. This is intolerable. And we were taught by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of blessed memory, that of all forms of inequality and injustice, inequality in health care is the most shocking and the most inhumane, and something we must deal with, we must address. And this has been a great inspiration for me to pursue this research and for others, and a problem we must overcome, and we must overcome it together. Next, please. In fact, the National Kidney Foundation, which has thousands of members, it's very hard to see because it's circled in small writing, but the small circle in writing there says that kidney disease is the silent killer targeting African Americans. That's what the National Kidney Foundation of the United States has said. Now, there are many different kinds of kidney disease. Next, please. Some caused by diabetes, some caused by an inflammation in the kidney, some is related to high blood pressure. But we see that this disparity covers all forms of kidney disease. And it is especially tragic because it affects lean, otherwise healthy-looking, young adult African-American men and women. They're affected. They're cut down in their young adult life by kidney disease. Now, what tools do I have, what relationship do I have to be able to get insights into that? Next, please. Well, for many years, I've been studying genetics. I'm a nephrologist. I've been studying genetics. We have made some very interesting discoveries unrelated to kidney disease about common ancestries among populations whom you never would understand. You'd never really think they share common ancestries. Well, we know all humans are part of one great family that God put on this earth. And we are all responsible for each other. And we all pray for each other as we do in this dome of faith. And we showed many years ago that in the DNA, hidden in the DNA, it wasn't evident to us until God gave scientists the ability to read the sequence of the DNA. We can see the shared ancestry. So this man, his name is Ephraim, a biblical name, and there I am. When we read our DNA, we can see the shared ancestry. Looking at us, you may not have guessed, but we share the same ancestry. Now, this DNA secret, which is now exposed because God has given us the tools to study these secrets in the DNA, can also give us insights about curing disease and preventing disease. Next, please. That's the power of DNA. And it didn't just happen because, scientists were smart or researchers. It's a blessing. It's a blessing that God has given us to be able to read the secrets that He's put in our body. And we were blessed to be able to discover a particular part of the DNA, a specific gene, and that's on the next slide, please, which is the source that's responsible for this increased kidney disease in the African heritage populations. By discovering that gene and these variants, we are now able at Rambam Medical Center in Israel to go ahead and try to find out who is at risk and what can be done to identify people at risk and prevent them from getting kidney disease, high blood pressure, and all of the complications that we don't want to happen. Next, please. Why did it happen that this gene resulted in a fourfold increase in kidney disease in African ancestry populations? Why would that have happened? Well, it happened because long time ago, it's like what we understand about malaria. What we understand in the past, this gene actually protected people from certain kinds of infections that were existent then, which are no longer a challenge. Even one copy, for those of you who know about malaria and sickle cell disease, you know about that. One copy, because we all have a copy from our mother and our father of each gene, one copy can protect. In this case, this gene that we discovered protects against an illness that was once a problem in Africa, namely African sleeping sickness, just like malaria. But two copies can cause a predisposition to kidney disease, increases the risk of kidney disease, just like malaria. Two copies can cause sickle cell disease. Some people have one copy, they don't get sickle cell disease, but they're protected from malaria. That is what went on. That is why that's how we found the relationship. Next, please. So now, what does this mean, let's say here in the United States, where if there are 38 million African Americans, close to 40 million African Americans in the United States, around 5 million, that's a lot of people, have this risk, have from both parents copies of this risk form of the gene that predisposes them to kidney disease. That sounds a little bit frightening, but there's some good news. There's good news, and we're getting there. Only some of them will actually get kidney disease, and many will not. So there's something that we can identify from those who have the risk but don't get kidney disease, that we want to make sure no one gets kidney disease. No one, even if they have. We are not slaves to our DNA. We are not. DNA is not our destiny. It is not our destiny. We have control. God has given us the wisdom and the insight and blessed us so that we can identify and prevent the disease. And that is our challenge. That's what we're doing at Rambam. I know there were some questions because people do have family members with kidney disease. I did want to, as a practicing nephrologist, I did want to address some of the questions and just say a few words about how does one know if they're at risk? What can you do about it today? What can one do about it? Next, please. So our goal is to maybe develop a vaccine for those at risk so they don't get kidney disease. Next. And just to be able to identify those at risk and then either prevent them from whatever risk factors there are that will cause that predisposition to turn into progressive kidney disease and dialysis. That's what we're doing. Let's just talk about what is available today. Next, please. Well, what are some of the risk factors? I mentioned African Americans with a family history of kidney disease, with a family history of diabetes, with a family history of high blood pressure. Now, this is what moved me, because when I was in the Roxbury neighborhood, I would see a patient, they would tell me about their extended family. I got to know them very, very well, followed them. We maintained contact for many years through the generations, and these are family stories, people who know their aunts, their cousins, etc., have kidney disease and want to protect their loved ones. Diabetes, high blood pressure, low birth weight. You know, modern medicine allows children to be born even early, not at the full 40 weeks. Well, that's a risk factor for kidney. We're thankful that God has given us the ability to take care of even very small infants, but later they have a greater risk for kidney disease. Use of certain medications and drugs, painkillers, many painkillers, that NSAID, that's drugs like naproxen and a lot of over-the-counter painkillers, they're not so good for the kidneys. Lupus, some people have heard of the disease called lupus. It's a risk factor for kidney disease. Kidney stones, childhood infections in the kidney, those are all risk factors. So one needs to think, do I have a risk factor? Does my son, does a family member, does a loved one, does my neighbor? What can be done? Next. Are there symptoms? Well, unfortunately, the symptoms are vague. The symptoms come late, sometimes too late, but there are some symptoms. Weakness, foamy urine, dark urine, puffy eyes, swelling, but mostly blood pressure. If someone's blood pressure is high, that's the single most important early sign. So one has to recognize these. Next. And but more important is to do some tests. If one is a little bit worried that maybe they could have kidney disease, it's really, really very easy to check. Very easy to check. One checks the blood pressure. That can be done anywhere, even at home, doctor's office, anywhere. Check the protein. Is there protein in the urine? Any family doctor can do that. Any clinic can do that. There are big programs to check that. A simple blood test for a particular test called the creatinine. That's all that's needed. No x-rays, nothing really fancy, very simple, and strongly encouraged. Next. Then if someone does have these early signs, what can be done? Lower the blood pressure, make sure the blood sugar levels are under control if someone is